Hi, my name is Evelyn Kung, and I'm the Clinical Director here at CARD. And I wanted to do a webinar for you guys to help all the parents who are trying to understand skills. Skills is a curriculum and it's an assessment with it. And I know many of the parents have gone through it and find it to be somewhat confusing, or maybe they're not used to technology and it becomes just something to navigate. So what we decided to do was to just help you guys out and to help you go through so that you can find the things that you need for your child's to see what your child's doing and to figure out like what you are really interested in finding out about your child's progress in the CARD program. So once we're starting is we're looking at all the skills. We'll go through all the different sections. First, we'll look at how to find your child's current treatment plan, how to look at their progress. We'll look at the current progress of problem behaviors, and then we'll look at just the general progress of your child over time. And we'll look at different deficits that show up across curricula, and we'll also look at reporting. And that's something that's, I know, interesting to many people as they're going through, because they want to see how their child's doing, and they miss being able to open a book whenever they can. So one thing with skills, though, is if you have a tablet or even if you have a phone, you would be able to go in and be able to look for the things that you want to look for. So you'll be able to go in and see what, how problem behaviors are decreasing or not decreasing, or you'll be able to look and see what their skill acquisition is like, and are they learning certain things. Or if you have questions that say you are away and you want to try something new with your child, but you're not sure if it's been introduced yet, you can always sign into skills from wherever you're at and be able to find what you need. So in terms of objectives, first what we'll do is we'll look at how to log in. I know that many families have this question, so we wanted to just spend a little bit time here. So if you're going to log into skills for parents and you have a CARD program, you're going to log into card.skillsglobal.com. This is specifically for all families who are receiving services from CARD directly. If you receive services from CARD, any ABA, you have direct access to a skills account for your child. There's no extra fee or anything, but if you are already a client, you have the ability to log on at card.skillsglobal.com. When you're logging in, make sure that you're at this website specifically. Sometimes if you put in this address, it'll lead you to different other CARD sites or skill sites. And you don't want to be on skillsglobal.com, or you don't want to be on bcba.skillsglobal.com. You want to be on card.skillsglobal.com. So make sure that you're able to log in. When you log in, if you don't know your username, you're going to ask your supervisor to find out for you. The other thing that you can do is maybe you know your username, but you don't know your password. And if you look, you'll be able to see that there is a way to, if you forgot your username or your password right at the bottom, you'll be able to tap right below the login screen and be able to make sure that you have access. You'll be able to tap in and find any information that you've forgotten, and you won't have to depend on your supervisor. If it still doesn't work, maybe you want to try this in the presence of your supervisor and they can help you navigate through. So when you log in, just remember that if you are going to log in, make sure your all the the caps lock is off, and make sure that you are actually putting in a password that is related specifically to this username. Sometimes it gets messed up. You feel free to reset it whenever you want. There's the ability to do it on this page. Once you log in, it'll ask you to update your account, and it's basically asking for your basic information. So you'll be able to fill it out, ask you, name, address, all of that. If you want to change your password again, it'll allow you to do that. But chances are many of you logged in years ago. So when you first started at CARD and you went through the admissions process, you were made to do the skills assessment. Right now in the skills assessment, if you came in within the last 6 months, you actually had 2 assessments to do. One was what we called a short assessment, where all of the lessons were, we shortened all of the lessons down, so the questions down, so that you were able to just answer it quickly, finish it, and then later on go in and answer the rest of the questions so that we could at least get the process moving for all of you. If you are new, there is some confusion sometimes between the short and the long assessment. Right now we're requiring both because we're trying to do the standardization for the long assessment and the short assessment together and make sure that they're reliable against one another. But at the beginning of treatment, you do look at your skills assessment, and you can see your results on your child's dashboard. And all you do is you would just tap the assessment tab and you would get the information that you would need. And when you do tap assessment, you can see how much you need to figure out. So you'll see that for every birthday up to age 7, skills assessment will add another year of questions or activities to your child's program. So if you are 5 years old and your birthday is coming and you're going to be 6, the minute your birthday happens, you'll get a whole new set of activities to fill out. So you'll be looking at this and you'll say, okay, in the social curriculum, here are how many more questions I need to answer because my child aged up 1 year. But it only does this up through the age of 7. After the age of 7, you have everything that a child will know up to the age of 8. And in all reality, outside of the academic assessment, if you can do everything in skills, or if your child can do everything in skills, you're an independent and functioning adult. So that's something that people sometimes get confused about because they think that this is only what a child needs up until the age of 8. But we pretty much only chose that because academically we needed an age. And for many of these skills, if you can go through everything in skills, you can be an independently functioning individual. So looking at this skills assessment and looking at the specifics, you'll see the 8 different curriculums here, and you'll be able to see how many you were able to, all the questions that you were assessed. You'll be able to see how many questions your child knew for each curriculum area. You'll be able to see what is still unknown to your child, and then if there's any new questions that you need to answer, it'll be in the unassessed category. And it'll tell you how many activities are in each of the curriculum. So if you look at this, you can see that the play curriculum is quite large. So if you are starting and you are you're at an age where your child is no longer playing with let's say functional pretend play, it would be something that maybe your supervisor would choose to skip over because it's not age appropriate anymore. So that they would leave those questions in there and they won't be focusing on those skills, because we really look at development in terms of what kids are learning and what's age appropriate to them. So if they are 15, we're not going to go back and do pretend play with baby dolls and things like that, but we might jump ahead and look at what we would call leisure skills. So skills that they can do in their free time, and teaching them how to do things like play basketball or shoot baskets, or teaching them how to throw a frisbee, or different types of things that they can enjoy on their free time on their own. And it's not necessarily play anymore, but it's play for adults. So now when you're looking at skills, you're most interested probably in your treatment program. Your treatment program will allow you to see all your lessons and all the data and how your child's been doing. But before we start that, we're going to look and see how skills is broken down. So first you have the 8 curriculum areas, and under each curriculum area you're going to have lessons. So a lesson could be object labels. And under lessons, there's going to be, all our lessons are split into 12 levels. And this is an interesting thing to us because initially we didn't start and say we wanted 12 levels of lessons. What we did was we got a whole group of supervisors together that had been programming for children for quite a while, and separately we all went to separate places and we said, go into lessons and write out what lessons always go together. So when you're doing a program for a child, everybody on their own went separately, wrote out what lessons came together, and when we came together, our reliability was almost 100%, which is completely unheard of. And it was amazing too, because when we were splitting all our lessons, we realized that we had actually we came up with 12 lessons almost automatically, or 12 levels, and it just formed very nicely, and we were able to go through and compare all the lessons that we typically have together, and somehow it all worked out. But we came up with these 12 levels for each of the lessons, so from very basic levels to advanced levels. And under each lesson, you will have a lesson section. So let's say if the lesson was dressing, a lesson section might be, all the types of clothing that you pull up. versus, maybe button-down shirts is a section, or maybe fasteners, shirts with fasteners, or pullovers. So lesson sections are really specific to the lessons. Not all lessons have lesson sections. It just depends on what is being taught there. And then within each lesson section or each lesson, there are activities. And these are what you guys that have been here a while, what we call SDs. This is what we're focusing on. It's, what responses are we getting to the stimuli that when the child is presented, whatever information that they're asked, and then how they're responding, that is the SD, the activity. If you're learning how to identify personal pronouns, or you're learning to identify counting objects, from 1 to 10, whatever it may be, you have your activity, and that is what you're focused on, and that is put into your child's treatment plan. And within every activity, you have exemplars. So if we were counting objects on a one-to-one basis, we might have counting as our activity, but the exemplars would be counting 1, counting 2, counting 3 objects, 4 objects, 5 objects, and so on. So that would be an exemplar. And then within each activity and exemplar, there are teaching steps. So this is what we would be, the supervisors would be forming specifically for your child. So within skills, there are general teaching steps about how to teach a skill. But then if you have a supervisor within CARD, they will be going in there and being able to edit those teaching steps for your therapists on your team so that they would be able to teach it in the best way possible for your child. So at the beginning, if you're interested to see what's in your child's treatment program, you basically would go to your child's dashboard. And on the left-hand side, it'll have your child's name, and here it says Super Camp D and dashboard. But it would have your child's name there, and then you would touch the Start Treatment button to be able to see what is in your child's program. So this is where you would touch that button, which is number 4, and then you would be able to view all the current lessons in your client's treatment program at this time. There are 3 filters here at the top. You'll see you can filter by curriculum, or so you would be able to go in and choose what curriculum you want to see, or you would be able to go in and filter by the lesson that you want to see, or you could go in and filter by the type of progress. Okay, so where is it at? Is it a lesson that's currently in progress? Is it a lesson that's been mastered? You'll be able to filter in any way that you're interested in. So if you're only interested in language programs, you could go and choose language programs. If you're looking at just how many lessons your child has and you want to see, you could just touch Show All, and it shows every lesson that is currently in progress. So on the right-hand side there, you can see where it says In Progress. If it says In Progress, that means data is being collected for that lesson, and your child is doing this, hopefully, in every session, every day. So if you look closer up, an activity is a subset of a lesson section, and each activity focuses on a specific skill that is being taught. So on this one, we have emotions as the activity, and the specific activity is the therapist contrives or captures an emotional situation that would cause the child to feel an emotion and presents the vocal stimulus, how do you feel? So the response from the child would say, like, I'm happy, or I'm sad, or I'm surprised, or whatever the target is that you're learning at that time. So this activity is a naming emotions activity, and it's specifically trying to get the child how to identify when asked. How do you feel, for the child to be able to tell you how they would feel in that situation. So let's look at the activity closer. You'll see all these different parts on when you look at an activity. First, you're going to notice that emotions is in the cognition curriculum, and the cognition curriculum has to do with themselves. So a person, how they're feeling, how they're thinking, everything that is within their desire. It's what in the ABA world we would call a private event. So it's something that is happening within a person, and we can only see the signs outside of how it feels. Nobody else is within your body and can say, like, I feel exactly how you feel, and so I feel happy right now. But we can see by the child's face, or we can see by their reaction, their physical reaction, where they start jumping or get really excited, that we know that they're happy. So you would be able to see the curriculum. Then you see the name of the lesson or the name of the activity, which is emotions. And the actual lesson section is naming emotions. And then the activity is the actual SD, which is where the therapist contrives or captures an emotional situation that would cause a child to feel a specific way. And then the activity status will tell you, is it in progress? If it's in progress, that means right now your child is working on it. If it says mastered, that means your child already mastered the activity and has moved on. Or maybe it could say generalization or generalized. That means it was in the process of being generalized, so that the child knows how this skill fits in multiple environments, across multiple people, across multiple things that make them happy. And then also right below the in progress or the status is the type of data sheet that's being used right now on the iPad. When you see the little iPad with a little check mark in it, it will tell you what types of sheets are being used. So in this one, it's actually in 2 types of data sheets. It probably depends on where it is in the process of learning. So it's in the DTD data sheets, which is discrete trial training, and it's also in the NET Exemplar data sheet, which is the natural environment training Exemplar worksheet, which is a more generalized form of than discrete trial. So in looking at your program, you're going to also look and see at status. You can also filter by status, as I said earlier. You can look and see, is it in progress? Is it pending? When it's in pending, it means your supervisor has pulled it over and is looking at it and might be considering it to add to your child's lesson. They don't have to add it, but it is something that they've opened at some point and they're considering, would this be helpful for a child, or is there another activity that is more helpful at this time? And that would be a pending status lesson. And whenever a supervisor adds a new activity to a child's program, they have to go in and introduce it. So they're introducing the activity with a specific date. If they don't introduce it, it will stay in the pending status, and it's basically in an area where there needs to be some decisions to be made about it, about whether we're going to start it or not start it. And another type of status is a mastered status. That means your child already has learned this to the mastery criteria that was designated for your child. It's been generalized, like I was saying earlier, that they've been able to do it in multiple settings across things. Or maybe it's lost. So in the research, there's no definition of lost. And for every child, it's different when they lose a skill, or maybe they lose some ability or another just because they haven't used it. And it's no reason to panic, but what we have is a potential lost aspect where we can say, hey, we need to mark it as lost because we're going to go back in and teach this skill again to make sure that it's solidified and to make sure that it is still mastered. And once, so they'll mark it lost, and then almost immediately most people will add it back into the lesson again and start working on it and start collecting data on it to make sure that it is not lost. And then if you put something on hold, maybe your child's really sick right now, or maybe school started and in the summer you were working on 30 lessons, but now that it's school and you have fewer hours in therapy, you might put some lessons that maybe your supervisor has deemed not as important and pulled up the ones that are most important and is focusing on a smaller number of programs so that they can have more chances of doing the lesson so that they can master it more quickly. And then you would just put it on an on-hold status. And in the on-hold status is when supervisors will go back at some point and probably bring it in again and introduce it. So it's not something to panic about if a supervisor decides to put something on hold. And here are some definitions for you guys, in terms of each of the lesson status, just so that you would be able to go through and see and understand on your own. So data sheets, we have, if you're at CARD, all of your therapists are carrying iPads, and it's a data collection method that we developed in conjunction with skills. So skills and the data collection hand skills logbook or skills book go together where your supervisor will add all the activities into the treatment program, start them all, put them all in progress, and then your your therapist will be able to see on their iPads when it's been pushed over to a specific data sheet. So if we look at discrete trial training, here are some differences between the different data sheets. Discrete trial training will have, DTT. It's basically individual and it's trial-based data where you're going in and there's a lot of repetition, saying things over and over so that the child can start responding correctly and appropriately and independently. And they're really looking at one exemplar at a time or one learning target at a time. Then a more generalized form of discrete trial is what we would call NET or natural environment training at the exemplar level. And with NET programs, they're using intrinsically motivating information or material. So the kid wants to do it. So if they really love apples and you want to see if they're going to use the color red, you might be getting them to say, like if they say, I want apple, and you really want red, you're going to say, oh, you either play dumb like, oh, which apple do you want? And getting them to say, like, I want the red apple. So red might be an exemplar under one of your lessons called colors. And if it's the color red, then they'd be marked as the child was able to use it in a more generalized setting because they requested the red apple. And one step more into generalization is natural environment training at the activity level or at the SD level. And this is a data sheet where we're bringing in different types of lessons together. And we're not so concerned anymore about whether they're using really specific exemplars like red, green, or yellow, but we're more concerned that they actually are just using colors in their everyday language. So we still might go to a situation where we're at the grocery store and I would ask them like, hey, what kind of apple do you want? And the child could say, I want some red apples, or I want some green apples, or I want the blue Gatorade, I don't want the yellow one. So just the fact that they're being able to use colors naturally on their own, that's what I'm tracking. I'm not concerned about whether they're using the specific color red, yellow, or green. I'm really concerned with, are they using colors in the appropriate place at the appropriate time? And it's the same thing like with counting. If I'm able to, my child knows how to count and can count objects, but I want to see in daily life, like I can say like, hey, how many of these chicken nuggets do you want? And can they tell me, on their own without any prompting, although that is slightly prompted, could ask them how many, but being able to say like, I'm really hungry today, I want 6 chicken nuggets, don't give me 3, that's too little. So being able to see, can they generalize numbers into their daily life? And I'm not so concerned about what number they're generalizing, but that they are using it in a way that is very appropriate to where they're at. So now once you understand, what activities, now let's look at the specific activity. You're going to click on number 4 and you're going to be able to see your treatment plan. And you're going to be able to show all so that you're able to see. And then on every page, on every activity, once you click on in progress, you're going to have a details page. And in this details page, you'll see you'll see all the different tabs. And you'll be able to see a details page at the beginning, and the details page will have the average age of the skill. You'll see the purpose of the lesson. You'll see the activity SD with examples. You'll get teaching points, and in those teaching points, your supervisors can, there's the generalized teaching points for everybody across all, for everybody. And then your supervisor can actually go in and edit the teaching points specifically for your child. So your therapy team can know specifically, oh, this child does better if you give them a textual prompt, just a reminder for them to read or to pay attention or, whatever it may be. Or maybe your child counts better if you line up the items and your child reminding everybody to always count from left to right. So whatever the lesson may be, there are specific teaching points that help every child. Some kids do better if the stimuli is larger. Some kids do better if it's smaller and within their visual field. It all is very, very different, and every child is different. But these teaching points are designed to be that you can go in and edit them specifically for your kid. And within this page, you're going to be able to look at medical necessity information at the bottom. Nowadays, with all the funding, we have to show to all these insurance funding agencies, especially the health insurance agencies, they want to know which activities are medically necessary. So at the bottom of every details page, there's a medical necessity information about, and it correlates according to the diagnostic information from the diagnostics manual that is used to diagnose autism spectrum disorder. So also on this page, you'll be able to see a baseline level, the date that you started this activity. If your supervisor has a goal written for it, it will be written here. If you have been working in this activity for a while, you'll be able to see the graph for all the mastered exemplars within the lesson. So if you have a brand new exemplar that you're working on in counting one-to-one objects and the number is 5, and in the last 6 months your child has learned to count from 1 to 4, you'll see a graph according to date about how it can be used on how their learning curve has happened. So if the way that we've written it here on this details page is you can use it for any type of funding. So I know that there are some questions sometimes where people will look at the details page and they'll say like, how do I use this for school, or how do I use this for insurance? It's made so that you can write, the IEP goals are written actually according to IDEA, so you can use the template goal there and actually fill in all the information, and you could use it for a school IEP, or you could use it for the insurance funding IEP, or if you get funding from another source and they want to know what a goal looks like, that goal actually fits for all IEPs. So if you are looking at IEP or for medical health insurance funding, if you fill out the baseline and you fill out the goal, all of this can be used for IEP. The overall exemplar mastery graph can use to show progress for your child. For any agency funding source that is looking to see how much has your child learned in this area. And you can use this exemplar mastery to show the progress that your child has made on this specific activity itself. So now what people are really concerned about, a lot of parents, is they want to know what their child is actually learning. And this is where you are going to look at exemplars. Okay, you're going to view exemplars. Exemplars are essentially learning targets within an activity, which is within a lesson. So a lesson might be numbers, an activity might be counting 1 to 1, and an exemplar might be counting 1 object, 2 objects, 3 objects, 4 objects. Then that's one thing. But you can also, if you had colors, it might be the lesson colors, and it might be receptive colors, so learning how to identify colors, and the exemplars would be red, green, yellow, purple, whatever it may be. So you are going to be looking at viewing exemplars. So in these exemplars, the parents don't have access to add exemplars on their own. These exemplars are added by your supervisor, or at the instruction of your supervisor. Maybe if you have assistant supervisor in your case, they would be adding it. And once in a while, if you've had a therapist who's been here a while, they might get some access where they're learning, they want to move up and they're learning how to do different things. So the supervisor might give them the ability to go in and change and add in exemplars when it's appropriate. So adding exemplars is something that supervisors learn how to do in supervisors training, because exemplars are very important. If you write your exemplar or your learning target too big, it might take your child a long time to learn it. And then when you're going to your funding source and having to prove that this is beneficial for your child, if it takes too long, a funding source might disagree and say, no, look how long it took for your child to learn this one exemplar. So we do a lot of training with our supervisors to teach them how to write exemplars that will show, within the progress time, according to the goal that they've written, how to show that their child has been making progress. As all the kids on the spectrum have different learning rates. So, you might write exemplars in one way for one child and write them a completely different way for another child. And both are appropriate. It's just that you're writing them appropriate to your child. So if you are interested in your child learning something really specific, let's say it's learning to get out of a car. I always say that that's one of the requests for a lot of the parents will say, can you teach my child how to get out of the car without dropping everything? And so in my exemplar, I would have to think about, okay, let me see, maybe they just have one object with them, and can they get out of the car with one object without dropping it? Then it's 2 objects. Then it may be types of objects, whether it's a backpack and a lunchbox for school, or maybe it's a backpack and a ball to go play a game. Like teaching them how to get out of the car. Each of those things could be a criteria. It could be listed as by number of objects they're carrying or types of objects they're carrying, and it would be really specific for that child. So in terms, if there's something that you want your child to learn, you just have to talk to your supervisor and say, hey, this is really what I want for my kid to be able to do. It would make my life a lot easier. Then your supervisor will go in and say, okay, let's figure out how to add a lesson that will address this, or maybe there's a lesson already in the program, and they'll go in and add an exemplar that will target something that will make your lives easier as parents. I am a big advocate for working with parents and trying to make their lives easier. So whenever I'm adding lessons in, I try to make it relevant to the parent, and really talking to the parent and asking them, okay, this is how we're using it, this is what we're adding, how can you see this relate to, like, in your life with him? Like, how, where do you see it going, and do you see it going? And sometimes parents can see it right away and they know, okay, I get why you're teaching this. And sometimes parents are like, I'm clueless, I have no idea why you're teaching this because it's not relevant. And then that gives me the opportunity to say, okay, so here are maybe the steps to getting to what you want over here, but first we have to learn, each step on its own before we can get to this long-term goal. Or maybe I'm just teaching them a new way and just saying, hey, I know that you don't see it, but you know what, this is coming. Your child's gonna be going to middle school next year, and we really need to start it now so that we can have the year to teach it eventually. It's not a goal for this year, but maybe in 2 years it is a goal, and it might take that long to get to the point where when we get to that need, that we're able to get to that need, and that's why we're adding this now. So in terms of exemplars and lessons, if you have a CARD program, you need to just keep open communication with your supervisor. Your supervisor has learned to program and choose lessons and to choose exemplars that are appropriate to where your child's at. Parents, unfortunately, cannot add their own, cannot go in and add lessons or exemplars, but it is something that only your supervisor or your assistant supervisor is able to do. And I know that some families really want the ability, but if anything, if you are at that point where you really want to add something and you don't know how to get it done, you should just talk to your supervisor, and they would be the people to help you with that, help you put it in if they think it's appropriate. And if they don't think it's appropriate, they should tell you why they don't think it's appropriate at that time. Because chances are, if you're asking, you have a reason, and a functional reason of why you're asking. So make sure you tell the supervisor, this is what I need. I want this. And they might say, okay, we're already on that path. It's just we're not there directly yet. There's another lesson. This is one of the lessons that's a building block to that point, but maybe it's something that is more far off, and we're still putting together other things might be more important at that time, and that you will get to it, and at some point they will address the need that you have and the request that you have. So if you look at your exemplars, you'll be able to see, like, you can show and hide logbook controls where you can see whether it's on DTT or an AT or an exemplar, whatever the logbook is. But if you want to see how your child's doing, you just have to tap on the graph, okay, next to each exemplar. And if you look at the graph, you're going to be able to see that if you tap a data point on the graph, the trial set will show up at the bottom. So you'll be able to see, and everything is recorded. You'll see if it's a square, it's in mass trial. If it's a triangle, it's in the expanded trial type. And if it's a circle, a light gray circle, it's in random rotation automatic, which means that your supervisor has chosen that trial type where they put it into random rotation, and the therapist has no way of choosing what comes next. It's on automatic, so it really is clearly to see if the child knows it, or if it's manual still, where you're on manual random rotation, where your therapist is going in and still choosing the distractors that are going against the new learning target that you're trying to master. So you can look at the graphs and see, like, the line that goes across the 80% line, that's anything above that is mastery, but your supervisor gets to choose what mastery is for every lesson, for every child. So the default is 80% over one night and over at least 2 therapists. But your supervisor can go in and decide, no, I want it at 100%. I want it across 5 therapists, everybody on the team, and I want it across 4 nights because I know that if the child can do it over 4 nights at 100%, they'll keep the skill and it won't go away, and they'll learn how to use it fluidly. But there are some kids where if they get to 80% and it's only 1 night and over across 2 or 3 people, that's all they need and they're able to keep it. So it really depends. There are some kids that the therapist might choose or the supervisor might choose that, no, I have to have it in mastery criteria over at least 15 days. If I have it 15 days, then I know that this child won't lose this skill and they'll really have it ingrained in them and they really did master it. As opposed to if I had it over 3 days, maybe over the weekend they didn't have any therapy, and when they come back, their percentage goes down of accuracy, and we don't want that to happen. So you will always be able to see the graph, and if you tap on a dot, it actually scrolls down to the trial set that you have. So if you look at the first one, Discrete Trial Set Data Example, on the left I have a lesson called Describe, and the SD or activity is called Tell Me About, and here it's Tell Me About a Tree. And you can see the nice learning rate that this child is doing. You know, the first time he saw it was, August 29th, and it was below 20% accuracy. And then on the 12th, September 12th, it was still it had gone up a little bit higher, but still below 20%. But then between the 12th and the 19th, it went up above 60%. And then after the 26th, so on the 28th, it went all the way up to 100%. And basically, it was in mass trial, and then it went into random rotation with other things, and it was over, more than 3 nights they chose, and that child was able to master it from August 29th to October 2nd. And you can see the nice learning curve that happens there about the tree. And then if you wanted to look at data specifically, I just chose one of those dates. So I chose the 30th, which is September 30th, and I went in and I could see that pretty much tree is darkened in black, so I know that that was my target exemplar. And then I can see all the ones that got correct. The child did get umbrella wrong, describing an umbrella wrong the first time, but that's okay. And it was marked as incorrect. And then you can see the overall correct was 94.44%. But the target was 100% correct on that day completely. So if you tap on one of the data points, it will immediately go to that trial set and show you how they did. Then you have NET exemplar data in the same way, except with NET exemplar data, it shows you, it takes all different types of lessons or different types of exemplars that you're choosing from different lessons. So you have to be more careful about what you're looking at and what you're choosing. So if you look at a data point, you can click on it and it scrolls to that point. And then you look at here's another example of a describe lesson. This one is when presented with a visual stimulus, it describes by using feature, attribute, function, category, and location. So you can see with this child, it was, had all this criteria that they had to describe, and on the left. And then on the right, it says NET exemplar trial data on the top. And I took one of the points and I highlighted the point, which was I think August 31st. And you can see all the criteria that went in to this. You can see that of the trial set, all the ones that are darkened were the specific exemplar that you're tracking. And then all the ones that are not darkened or not bolded, those were distractors or mastered ones that they've done before and the child already knew. And you can see the overall percentage and the target. And you can see how, what percentage was incorrect and what percentage was correct. The overall correct was 77.78%, and then the target, though, was 100%. And the therapists are learning to write notes in here, too. So if there's something that happened during the lesson or they noticed something, they would write notes in right below the trial set number. And then you could also see the name of the therapist that was there, and then what time they were there, and then what trial type they used. On this one, they used random rotation manual and went through and did all of the lessons. Then we have a task analysis data sheet. Task analysis is usually used for daily living skills, so adaptive behaviors. And this is where there's many steps that form one skill. So, this one that I chose to show you an example is in the dressing lesson, and it's pull-up clothing. So your supervisor had written 5 teaching steps for it. They lay their shorts on a flat surface, they pick up the waistband, put feet in correct short slots while sitting, and then stand up and pull shorts to the thighs. So this is like 4 of the steps, and they started in what they would call a backward chaining method, which is they prompted the first 3 and the child completes the last step on their own, and that's what they're taking data on. And you can see on the right it says introduced, and that's the one that data is being taken on. But your therapist would still need to follow the criteria on how to perform and the steps that are needed. And then as they master 1, you would introduce number 3, which is put feet in correctly, and so they would prompt the first 2 steps and then have the child perform the 3rd and 4th step on their own to the point where they all 4 are introduced, and then you're doing the whole skill, all 4 steps in the skill, and then data is being tracked for each one, and you can see how long it takes for each step, each teaching step, and you'll be able to see the exact same way that you did for where you can look at the trial type right below. Teaching steps data, it has the graph on top, and then it tells you all the teaching steps, and it shows you whether the child got it incorrect or correct, or if they needed prompts and what kind of prompts it is. But you can go in and see every trial, all the trial data for each of the steps when your therapist goes through it with your child. Then NET activity data. NET activity is very generalized, like I was talking about earlier. For this one, since it's the activity that's generalized, you would have to go to the status tab, and you would look to see where it says skills logbook NET status, and then that's where you would find the graph for that type of trial type. And then you would be able to see the same thing. You would be able to see all the graph, and you would be able to see, if you tap one of the points on the graph, you could see all the data that follows it. So, this data sheet collects data on multiple lessons at once. So, and it's very much in a generalized setting. So you'll be able to see like the dates it was targeted, who ran the trial set, percentage of correct and incorrect responses, the types of prompts used. You'll be able to see any trial set notes that your therapist left, and then what activities were targeted then. And you can see there's a graph here from the social curriculum for assertiveness. So this is the therapist contrives or captures a situation that evokes refusal behavior or requesting cessation with an adult. So it's like somebody bothering them and they need to tell the person to stop. And it's teaching them to be assertive, and you can see the data that is gone through. And the same thing is you tap a data and then you get the SD trial data right after it. And you can see what they got right and what they got wrong. He had no response at the beginning, and that's any no responses are marked as incorrect and go into the incorrect category for percentage. Now we want to look at notes. There's different types of notes that your therapists and your supervisors are writing in skills, and this is probably the most interesting thing for parents. And they want to know what is being changed, and instead of going to all these different pages and all these different activities, they want to know like what is actually happening. So there are different types of notes. There's clinical notes that are used to document any meetings that you have, observations. General supervisor notes are any directions that your supervisor is giving that is not lesson specific or behavior specific. It overall how to run a session. So if your child has a reinforcement schedule, or if your child has a token board, or if your child has an activity schedule to follow, all of that information will be in your general supervisor notes. Safety notes, we have a lot of kids who elope. So it's information such as how to lock the door so the kid can't run out the door, or maybe if your child has seizures, what to do in case of a seizure. So anything that has to do with the safety of the child, you're going to look here. And then there's lesson notes, which is specifics on the lesson. Behaviors notes, specific to the behaviors. You want to see supervision notes report. This is actually what most parents want. They want the supervision notes report. They want to be able to know how to get it. This takes all the different notes and puts it into one report. You could put in a time frame. So if you're only interested in September, you would put in September through 1st through September 30th, and you would be able to see all the notes that were written for your child for this month, and you could see everything that was being worked on. So first you would go to your child's dashboard, and then you would go to reporting. You'd click on reporting, and then at the top right there you would see this new supervision notes report. You tap on that, you put your data range, and if you want to print it out, you can click the little printer icon on the right hand side, and it will gather all your notes into one document. This, I've found out for parents, is what they really, really want, okay? Because it's like old school where you can print it out and just take it wherever you want, or maybe it's just all in one place and you don't have to flip through and look at all the graphs. ABA people love their graphs, so that's why there's all this flipping through, and it's really looking at detail to see what matters, what help them become better clinicians and to program better for your child by looking at graphs. But a lot of times parents just want to see what's going on with my child, and this is a good snapshot for your child. The other place to see for your child is to look at progress charts. There's different types of progress charts for your child. If you look at the dashboard again, you're going to click on where it says progress charts under the child's name and basic information. And there's different types of progress charts that you're going to be able to see. There are treatment progress charts where it takes everything and puts it into a bar graph across all the curriculum areas. You'll be able to see that the dark green was known, what the child knew coming in. Anything that is in light green is what's been mastered. Anything that's in red is what still needs to be taught in that area. And anything that's blue is something that was specifically generalized. So I gave you another look too. There's another graph here that is looking, and this is for a child that's been here since 2014. And if you look at his graph, it looks very nice. There was he knew a lot coming in, but really I think he's 15, and he was mainstreamed, but always lost. And so when he went to middle school, they were really concerned, like, how do we, there's all these other skills that mattered, like executive function, to organize himself. And you'll see that he has a lot of generalized skills in the executive function, because he knew how to look in his planner, but maybe he just didn't know how to do it in school. Or he knew how to do it in math, but he didn't know how to do this in English to keep up with homework. So there's a lot of generalized skills in that area, but you can look and see in 2 years or 2.5 years, this is how far he's come. Then you can look at it by lesson, look at the details of the lesson. Green indicates skills that were known or mastered. So it's known or mastered, so that means they could have learned it here in therapy. And then red represents what is unknown or not yet mastered. And you can look at, I pulled out the social lesson details for you guys so you can see. So you would go to lesson details and you choose mastery, and then you can see what it looks like. If you touched assessment, you can see what he looked like at the time of assessment. So that's a good comparison that a lot of families use. Then you have your clinical timeline. In your clinical timeline, it puts everything all on one graph. So there's no real y-axis because there's a different measurement for everything. But the yellow line is the curve of learning targets that he's mastered. So exemplar mastery, that's the yellow line, and you can see this child's done really well. And then all those other colors at the bottom are all different behaviors that he was engaging in. And below this, I don't show it here, but there's actually a little legend to show you what each color represents, each behavior. And then those, you see, it looks like bars. Those are blocked times, and those are duration measures. So we also write in here, like if he was out of school, or he took a break from therapy, or if they were on a new medication, we put all the discrete events and duration events on this graph too, so that we could be able to see, like, oh, when he was on this medication, his learning went down or his learning went up, and we're able to see some of the correlations. And you can go through and see that, and then you can also narrow it. So if you look, you can narrow and adjust the time period. So like for a lot of people, they want to know, like, within a time period, I want to see how he did. And you could use these highlighted bars at the very top. It's on the left and right, and you can move them and shift your graph so that it only shows you a specific time period. And if you look at this next graph, I narrowed the dates to just what he did in 2015 and the start of 16. And I made it bigger, and I just narrowed it because this is all I wanted to see, how he's been doing during this time period. And then I looked at verbal operants and how this is a functional view of language that behavior analysts look at, and is looking at their abilities from a functional view as opposed to a speech therapist view, which is through linguistics. So as a behavior analyst, I'm very interested in how functional a child's language is. And this is a chart that would help you understand this information. And if you have never heard about verbal operants, you should talk to your supervisor and get them to tell you for your child where they're at and how they're doing. There's a skills history you can look at. You can go here right under your dashboard, and you have an activity history. You can go in and see, like, what was mastered in which lessons and what's on hold, and be able to see it. You can see what skills were known when you came in. Another big part of a child's plan is the behavior intervention plans. This is located on that same dashboard where it says behavior intervention plan right below the child's name. You could go in there. A lot of you have filled out a CFA, which is when there's a new behavior that occurs. Your supervisor can give this to you to fill out so they can have some more understanding of when a behavior occurs for you with your child. Once it's filled out, it goes into an archive, and then the supervisor decides whether they're going to write a behavior intervention plan on it. And so they can go into the behavior intervention plan archive and look, and these are all the current. On the right side, it says current, and if it says current, that means this is what your therapists are taking data on, and this is what they're focusing on, and this is what their intervention procedures are focusing on, decreasing either the rate or the intensity of these behaviors. Here's an example of a BIP graph. You can choose how much you want to see. It automatically goes to 10 sessions at a time, but you can choose if you want to see all the sessions within the last month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, or just show all. I showed all here for you so that you can see how a child's non-responsiveness has decreased significantly. And a lot of families are really interested. Funding sources are really interested in this too. They want to see, like, hey, if you ever have to show a teacher, you know, look, he has gotten better. Now the non-responsiveness is almost gone completely, which for this child is true. That was his coping mechanism before, was he would just tune out. And so he was the good child in the class, and the teachers just never knew that he wasn't, you know, when the minute he didn't know what was going on, he would just tune out. And everybody thought he was fine in the classroom, but then when they would go home, they would realize he didn't know anything that had been taught and he didn't understand any of it. So now that we have the non-responsiveness gone, it was a behavior that may not have looked severe, but in reality it was severe, and it severely impacted his ability to learn because he wasn't asking questions or letting other people know when he didn't understand what was going on. And then we have our skills logbook, and this is our data collection method. And you have a dashboard you guys can go in and look at. At the top on the left is the BIP graphs, and then on the right is your skill acquisition graphs. But under lesson name, all those little flags with the yellow in the yellow box, that's an alert. That means something has been mastered or changed in that lesson for that child, so that it alerts the supervisor to go in and see what's going on with that lesson. You'll see the supervisor's notes in the middle, and then you'll be able to see how your child's doing at the bottom in terms of what have they mastered, what have they generalized, what have they lost, you know, really looking at the specifics. And then if you're just curious to see what was done during today's session, you can go in and see to the program checklist at the top and see what lessons were done in different periods with different therapists on different dates. You can go into the lessons tab and see what lessons are in your child's program, and you could tap on those lessons and it'll bring you to the details and exemplars page that you saw earlier. You can go into clinic notes and read anything that you want, you know, whatever your supervisor wrote about. You can go into general supervisor notes to read what is relevant and what your supervisor is writing for your staff. You can go into safety notes to see, make sure that all the safety criteria if your child has a seizure, that it's written correctly, or if maybe there's something else that needs to go in there that you haven't told your supervisor or your therapy team about. So safety notes are important. There's also other tools that you can use. Reports, this is what I was talking about earlier, where a lot of families want to see the reports. If you go into reporting, you'll be able to see any report that was written for your child for the funding source, and you'll be able to see copies of it here. Clinical information, this is newer. Not all families are using it yet, but this is important because we want to put assessment information. So if your child was tested at school or regional center or by a private psychologist, we want to put the information into his skills account, and we want to know about medications so that we can put in any medication changes that were there and just be able to focus on that and see, like, were there any changes in this child's behavior or learning rate due to medications. We have a reinforcement inventory that you can fill out. If you find that your therapists are having a hard time motivating your child, you can go in and fill this out and tell your supervisor, hey, I filled it out, so let's go use something from there because I know my child. And a lot of times we encourage families to fill this out every 6 months. A lot of you filled this out when you first started at CARD, and then as your therapists have gotten to know the child, they may not have had to do this as formally, where they're doing shorter assessments to see what's what will motivate a child for a day. And then a lot of your funding sources now are asking for caregiver training. We are demanding this of all families because all families have to be involved in their child's program. It's a family-based program that will be most effective. So we have caregiver training goals. So this could be for you, it could be for your husband or wife, it could be for your grandparents, if grandparents are taking care of your child a lot, or maybe if you have a full-time nanny and you need them to be able to. We can work with your supervisor on writing caregiver goals for everybody. So that really is a very quick synopsis. I know that it took a long time and this is a lot of information, but I think that if you go through this and slowly, and you can go into your skills account and play with it, you'll be able to find information that is useful for you. I know that we got questions from a couple of different people through the session, and I'll try to answer them quickly. So the first question is, my daughter's extremely scared of medical interventions, specifically shots. Her reaction is frightening. She's 14 years old. Are there skills or interventions that may help? Yes, there definitely are. We actually will work with kids to adults on systematic desensitization. So we'll work with the doctor and say, like, okay, what are all the things? So we might ask you to go purchase all the things that you would get in a shot. So maybe, a syringe without the needle. We'll show them, get them familiar with it, pretend that they're in a doctor's office. We will work, your supervisor will know how to gradually get them to the point where they're able to accept a shot and where they can decrease a lot of their fears. It's not specifically here in skills because systematic desensitization is actually a behavioral technique, and it would have been a technique that they would have learned how to implement in their program and in their training. But, we do this a lot with other kids. Like, we have a child who gets, IV IG treatment, and we had a whole progress where we got, the cord to draw blood, and we practiced it, and so that the child just got used to having something on their arm, or how to hold their arm and not to move. We've done systematic desensitization for going to the doctors, going to the dentist, people like opening their mouth and keeping it open, and all the instructions that filled. So it is something that you just have to bring up to your supervisor as something that you want to address, and they'll work on it. And then I have another question. Why or how does my son's supervisor pick which sequence of lessons to do in what order? I notice that sometimes we skip over lessons that are marked BB. So one thing I didn't go over is there are 3 types of activities. There are BB, which stands for building block, and there's F, which stands for fundamental, and E, which stands for expansion. All the building block steps of activities build up to that fundamental. So if we feel like that fundamental one is too hard for the child to go to directly, we will add those activities that have building blocks. But if we feel like your child, and it sounds like your child's probably a very fast learner, we will skip over those building blocks because all of those building blocks activities would have been encompassed in the fundamental activity. So there are some kids where I just do fundamental activities, and then I'll go through and do it. When I'm doing it, as I'm achieving the building blocks, I might check them off because, we jumped through. But there are some kids who do better if you're doing each building block at a time, and they're shorter steps or sequences that build up to that final fundamental skill. And then there is something called an expansion skill, which is teaching the child to do it fluently, but also almost better than they really, to get along socially. A lot of the expansion skills are socially based, so that we're getting them to be really good socially or really good at something where they could, if they met the fundamental, that would have met the independent need. But if they are doing the expansion step, then it's getting it to be a really good skill and learning how to use it well. And then question 3, can I use skills to get ready for an IEP? Definitely. Skills was written with IEPs in mind initially because so much of the work that we were doing is with schools. So you just have to go look, and it says, I keep asking my daughter's school to give her goals for things at lunch, social goals. How can I use skills to make a reasonable get of goals that are appropriate for her? So you can look and see, like in your the number 4 is start treatment, but your number 3 is your activities. You can go in there and look socially, and there are like lunchtime goals, or you could look at the adaptive section and look at eating lunch and try to figure out what is in there that you've said no to, and that they can go in and be able to choose some goals for your school. Your supervisor should be able to help you with this, to do some good goals, choose some good goals for you so that you can set them. And within each activity, there is, all the goal language along with benchmark language, which is what a lot of schools use to show, for their child to demonstrate progress. So you can definitely use everything that on that details page to help support building some goals for your daughter at lunch. And then, can I add a lesson to my child's program? Parent directly, no, but you can talk to your supervisor about why you want a lesson added, and talk to them, and they can tell you like whether your child's ready for it or not, or if they feel like there's other priorities in the time. But at some point, they should be able to get what you want in there. It might not be immediately, but maybe there are some prerequisite steps that you haven't been addressed yet, that they feel like are on the way to that goal that you want, or that lesson that you want added. Not everything is going to be, a lot of times our families come in and will ask for a skill that is very, very difficult and has many, many prerequisites. And some supervisors are good at showing where a lesson is going, and some are not as good. But if you ask your supervisor, they should be able to tell you, okay, after he learns X, Y, and Z, we can add that lesson. And if you keep that communication open, because I think it's very important to address the needs and the wants and the desires of what parents want for their child. And you just want to keep open the communication, and your therapist and your supervisor should be telling you when it's a good time to add things, and when is not a good time. And that's all the training that they've really received, is learning how to choose the right lessons and what lessons are appropriate to the child according to what the needs are and what the behaviors are too. Because a lot of times we'll address behaviors, we want a behavior to go down, but at the same time we have to teach them a replacement behavior. So that might be a priority at the beginning, because we want to get the rates of problem behaviors or challenging behaviors down before we get to some other desired lessons or goals that we want for the child. So I believe those are the 4 questions that we got for today. So if there's anything else, feel free to email some in. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. But I hope this was helpful for all of you. Thank you.